More than any other genre, horror's been crippled by low-budget, low-quality stinkers over the years. However, what's even more curious is when a film manages to be scarily good for the most part, only to fall at the hurdle of delivering a solid final girl protagonist. And so with that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with 10 great slasher horror movies with annoying final girls. Number 10. Mandy Lane in All the Boys Love Mandy Lane. Despite being a dark inversion of the final girl trope, Mandy Lane still manages to be a bit of an eye-roller. For the first half of the film, the weirdly oblivious Mandy seems to saunter comfortably through life without putting much thought into the drooling men obsessing over her everywhere she goes. She says little of interest and, if it wasn't for her name being in the title, could almost be dismissed as a borderline object of lust for the horny teenage boys that populate much of the cast. Needless to say, her weekend getaway with some other high schoolers quickly descends into murderous mayhem. It turns out Mandy's old friend and all-round social outcast Emmett has had enough of seemingly everything and is now killing everyone off for rejecting him. In the kind of surprise twist that's often not that surprising these days, Mandy's actually in league with him, and better still, is the real mastermind behind the whole thing. The shift in character and arc is a bit jarring to say the least here, as is Amber Heard's struggle to really get the evil, aggressive side of her character across effectively. The ending scenes of her getting away with it all, which were clearly meant to be chilling on paper, just come out a bit hollow in practice thanks to rather half-baked character development and plotting in an otherwise suspenseful film. Number 9. CHRISSY in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. It's amazing how much mayhem CHRISSY manages to sidestep in this critically canned but wildly entertaining prequel compared to her boyfriend and buddies. There's a few excuses provided in this film as to why Jordana Brewster's one-dimensional lead character doesn't suffer meat hooks, beatings, flayings, and teeth removals like her friends. All of them really just serve as filler to move this maddened showcase of R. Lee Ermey's scary acting chops along at a quick, suspenseful pace. Initially sent flying after a car crash due to an altercation with a biker, she manages to miss Ermey's crazy Charlie Hewitt Jr. rocking up to the scene for some murderous mayhem. When everyone else gets stuck in this house of a lengthy round of increasingly sick torture and torment, CHRISSY winds up befriending one of the bikers from earlier who agrees to investigate the situation. When CHRISSY's boyfriend gets maimed beyond belief, she just sort of sits around quietly waiting for Leatherface to come back and finish the job. As oddly thrilling as this underrated entry in the long-running franchise is, its lack of development in regards to CHRISSY ultimately hinders some of the dramatic stakes when she becomes the final girl. As shocking as her surprise death at the hands of a backseat driver Leatherface is, it's not particularly impactful emotionally, which slightly hinders the otherwise well-executed climax. Number 8. Sam Carpenter in Scream. The latest entry in the Scream franchise introduced another curious wrinkle into the original mythos. Billy Loomis, the big bad of the original film, whose diabolical antics were horribly undercut via retcon in Scream 3, now has a surprise kid who's all grown up and back in Woodsboro as a new slate of Ghostface killings kick off. It's barely even allowed the room to be a plot twist before Discount Randy reveals this new killing spree is a requel, a rehash sequel that just repeats everything from the original. It's something that many cinema goers have been expressing dissatisfaction with lately. While the satire of the requel format is on point here, the Billy plotline doesn't do much to make Sam a compelling or easy to root for lead like Sidney Prescott was in the earlier films. The borderline convoluted story threads that allow her boyfriend Richie to be one of the killers also doesn't quite pack the punch of the Billy reveal from the original film. Hopefully the next installment can course correct slightly and give Sam a more logical path to walk down as the new lead protagonist. Actress Melissa Barrera did a fine job with the material, but the lack of originality ultimately hindered this long-awaited sequel. Number 7. Victoria Hayes in Terrifier. On one hand, it's pretty easy to feel sorry for poor Victoria's bowel-twisting conclusion in Terrifier. Let's not even get started on the second one. Not only does most of her face get killed off, but she also loses her sister and mind before the end credits roll. As unfortunate as all of that is, it doesn't change the fact that she spends much of the first film running around screaming aimlessly. In fact, for much of the film's runtime, it's safe to say her older sister Tara is the superior character both in development and story. In Victoria's case, she had one job to do: bring Tara and Dawn home. Instead, like so many folks who inexplicably lose all common sense and reason when in danger in a horror movie, Vicky's easily lured into a spooky basement by the monstrous Art the Clown. When she later has the chance to escape Art's clutches, she spots her sister's corpse and pauses to do a whole lot of not hugely convincing grieving. Obviously, the loss of a sibling is devastating, but it's just infuriating watching her hold up for so long despite needing to run for her life. Her stupidity and adherence to the gaps in logic that seem almost required of horror characters cost her most of her face due to Art being peckish. The face munching's a suitably revolting moment in this splatter-heavy nightmare fuel of a film, and much of it could have been avoided had Victoria used the magic of common sense. Number 6. Michelle in The Burning. This cult classic slasher was very unsubtly modelled on the Cropsey legends from New York in the 70s. Cropsey, an escaped mental patient and child abductor as per the legends, was warned of in campfire stories everywhere. In The Burning, a hapless caretaker named Cropsey, because the missing E really makes a difference, is left horribly disfigured after a, burning takes place in his cabin. By the time the key cast of many soon-to-be victims arrive at Camp Blackfoot, Cropsey's fully embraced life as a murdering maniac to cope with his general rage over his unfortunate disaster years earlier. With final girl Michelle, we discover what might actually be the best way to survive a slasher's rampage. Just don't get involved. Upon discovering a litany of the bodies Cropsey's left behind, Michelle heads back to camp to call the police. It is of course a logical thing to do, but it also leads to her completely sidestepping the climax of the film and having zero involvement in Cropsey's defeat. She just pops up with the cops in hand the moment he's gone. Not like they're even useful now that civilians took matters into their own hands. Actress Leah Ayres does a passable job in the role, and the character's inoffensive for the most part. However, her penchant for finding Cropsey's crime scenes gets tiresome, and her lack of participation in the third act almost makes her survival feel unearned by slasher movie standards. Number 5. Laurie Campbell in Freddy vs. Jason. After more than a decade of rumours and delays, Freddy Krueger finally got to meet Jason Voorhees in one of the campiest films of either Monstrous Killer's filmography. When it comes to the camp factor, look no further than final girl Laurie Campbell. Actress Monica Keena's reactions and facial expressions are often ridiculously over the top, as is the character's surprise knack for getting the better of Mr. Krueger. Bizarrely, when Laurie's reactions aren't overblown, her general delivery is rather wooden. In a film already let down by picking one of the worst scripts among the many Freddy vs. Jason drafts out there, the fact that Jason showcases a more convincing range of emotions than a leading star might just take the cake. If there's one thing that can be said in Laurie's favour, she does at least get Freddy into the real world. They're crazy, but apparently less evil since the film very conveniently gives the humans an excuse to help him. Jason finally hands Freddy the whooping he's always deserved. Well, almost. Despite the film being called Freddy vs. Jason, Laurie gets the honours of removing Freddy's head from his body. That's right, not Jason, not one half of the showdown people paid to see. No, Laurie gets that big moment. Number 4. Justine Fielding in Tormented. Even most of the characters in this British, darkly comedic take on the genre seem to find head girl Justine Fielding a bit much. It's first noticeable during her eulogy of a deceased student she doesn't even seem to know existed. Despite presenting herself as a straight-laced, morally upright figure, Justine's overjoyed when the school's in crowd, a crew of psychopathic pupils notorious for their bullying and general nastiness, extend her an olive branch. Her 5 days of attempting to be in with the cool kids goes pretty horribly wrong on all levels, as the ghost of a boy they bullied wreaks murderous havoc. By design, most of the figures in this movie are comically unlikable, coming off as a parody of both US high school stereotypes and British teen shows such as Skins. Tormented is very much in the Larry David camp of providing the viewer unsympathetic protagonists who never learn their lesson. The problem with Justine is she's positioned to be the exception to that rule, but in order to remain relevant to the plot, has to rub elbows with the rest of the detestable cast. It's a fine line that doesn't quite pan out, as the awkward romance with popular guy Alex manages to somehow be both rushed and plodding due to odd pacing. In the end, after a series of ridiculous murders of one-note, one-dimensional characters, Justine getting framed for their deaths seems much funnier than it should be, even if this film often meant for a jokey touch. Number 3. Blair Lilly in Unfriended. Sometimes the final girl's just plain unlikable by design. Look no further than Blaire Lilly, the oddly diabolical lead of this internet-age take on the slasher flick. Blaire's old friend/enemy, Laura Barnes, committed suicide following the release of a supremely embarrassing drunken video in which she does potty time in her sleep at a party. From there, we catch up with Blaire, her boyfriend, and some other so-called friends via a Skype group chat. Needless to say, the spirit of Laura's determined to ruin their evening. Bar the curious group chat setup, the narrative follows many of the tropes from the slasher genre to the letter, namely the steadily piling deaths of the teenage cast played by adults. We discover a variety of unfortunate facts about Blaire, from cheating on her boyfriend and stealing and crashing her friend's mum's car, to filming that unfortunate defecation video of Laura. To top it all off, she tries to move the blame of the video onto someone else, all while her friends and boyfriend die in increasingly sadistic fashion. By the time she's the final girl, it's hard to really get invested in her potential survival. Between the miserable, often petty character arc and the shrill delivery of much of her dialogue, Blaire's both annoying and despicable. Number 2. Julie James in I Know What You Did Last Summer. In what might feel like sacrilege to 90s kids, Jennifer Love Hewitt's Julie James is actually pretty grating when one stops to think about it. Right off the bat, all of the leads are painted in a negative light thanks to their accidental rundown of someone who just happens to be an evil, near-indestructible killer named Ben Willis. From there, Julie's obsession with what they did leads to her tumbling down several rabbit holes, while her friends get tormented and in some cases slaughtered. There's an argument to be made here that Sarah Michelle Gellar's Helen would have actually made for a better final girl. While she didn't have the plot-leading romance with Freddie Prinze Jr.'s Ray Bronson, the actual character and performance were more engaging than Julie's awkwardly handled, guilt-ridden antics. Julie's reconciliation with Ray after they get rid of scary old Ben rings hollow after the brutal but not hugely scary murders of their friends that have recently taken place. Bizarrely, the film ends on a dramatic epilogue the sequel completely forgets about. Julie, now in college in Boston, is attacked in the shower by who we presume to be the still alive after all Willis. Funnily enough, the second film has a similar ending, with the presumed dead Ben turning up in her bedroom. Had she and Prinze Jr. come back for the third outing, what are the odds that this sequel epilogue would have been forgotten about too? Number 1. The girl/princess Gemstone in Laid to Rest. If there's one thing Laid to Rest gets right, it's the villain. Chrome Skull is a surprisingly effective and engaging killer from which much of this film's entertainment value is born. If there's one thing that Laid to Rest gets wrong, it's the final girl. Princess Gemstone's on the run for much of the movie, constantly getting chased by the crazed Chrome Skull from one murder stuff location to the next. In amongst all the tense sequences and chases though, is next to no effort in regards to developing Princess as an even vaguely three-dimensional character. Worse still, even if the writers had taken the time to flesh her out a bit more, it likely would have been for naught. Actress Bobby Sue Luther just doesn't seem to be all that into realistic acting, instead opting for increasingly grating screaming every time that no-good Chrome Skull shows up. Bizarrely, the considerably more acclaimed and famous Lena Headey was in this as well for a painfully brief showing. Considering her track record of more nuanced, versatile performances over the years, it's curious the folks in charge didn't opt to try and switch the two stars around. As it stands, Princess Gemstone lets down an otherwise surprisingly solid low-budget slasher flick. And that concludes our list. If you think we missed some, then do let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there. And I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.